What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my Make.com course. In this video, we're going to be covering everything introductory to Make.com and all the foundational concepts that you need to understand, like the operations functions, the modules, all that boring stuff before you can actually go out there and use the platform. So this is the only video where I'm not going to be building a high ROI system. Every other video, I might do that, but not on this one. I just want to actually go over how to build systems. So if you're an experienced person with Make.com or not, and you don't want to spend 17 hours on boring stuff, on basically this video's for you. So stay tuned and let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, why don't we start by signing up for Make.com? A lot of people draw this out, but it's just super simple. Just go to Make.com. Um, and basically whatever your language is, just click the get started free. And if you're looking at this video in the future, it probably looks different, but the sign up page looks like this. So we have an example of how to sign in, but it's pretty straightforward. But I just wanted to show this part and just hit sign up for free. And next it's going to ask you to verify your email account. So let me just do this as an example really quick. And I'm just going to open up an incognito tab. And now that my email address has been verified, let me just make sure it's the same password. And let me make sure that's the email, and awesome. Then you will be confronted with an onboarding sign up page. Pretty self-explanatory. It just takes a little while. Okay. So after all that's done, we're going to do a couple of things. Number one, we're going to go through every single thing that's on the Make.com UX, like literally every little thing, so that I can tell people that this is a comprehensive course. It's not really that comprehensive, but I just want to go through every module. So 99% of the whole UX dashboard is we don't even touch. So it's important to understand a couple of these buttons and concepts, but you don't need to know all of them to drive revenue. No, right? I just signed up for an account, and realistically, what you want to do is, if you're gonna take Make.com seriously, just change this to build monthly and get the basically it's $20, the pro plan, so that way you have everything you need. So that way, you have if you have a scenario that's extremely long, you know, it's like $8 worth of use. So you might as well just pay for the pro plan. Just skip to it. I haven't had a use for Teams yet, so I'm not going to go into that. But what I am going to do is going to sign into one of my account that actually has a paid license, so you can see all the buttons and everything that's on the left and right sides. So that's how you sign up for Make. I don't have a credit card for you guys to use, so you're gonna have to deal with that on your own time. But assuming that you have everything set up, this is what your setup is going to look like. In the top left corner, we're going to have the organization tab, and we're going to have that there. So this will be different for you. And we have a bunch of subscriptions information over here. You'll see that my rate's a little bit different because I've been with Make.com for a while. So um, this is just subscription information. This is an operations graph to show you how many operations you are using. Now, operations is defined as one module execution, and I'll go into that later, but this is something like, everything. I'll just sign on now and just take a look at it. Data transfer, you will almost never ever use this. I did actually talk to somebody who used this, but they used big, massive flows. It was, using like 50 gigabytes per month. It was basically never going to happen to you. So don't worry about that. So don't worry too much about that. You can upgrade by clicking this button. You can buy extra operations. You know, uh, you can go to auto purchasing. Uh, it's actually kind of dumb because the cost of purchasing is more than buying extra operations. So it's almost like they punish you for trying to think ahead. And then down here, you got a list of your active scenarios, but there's better ways to get into that information. Okay, as I mentioned, I will literally go through all the tabs here, and I'm going to tell you about the Teams tab. I basically never use this. You may use this if you have teams. So if you have a bunch of teams, but realistically, you probably not something you're ever going to have to worry about. Um, Basically, it's not super important. You can just invite people into your Make.com workspace if need be. The subscription tab is here, which obviously just covers all the subscription information, all the past billing periods, all that stuff that you've undertaken. You can download your PDF invoices received, and if that's important for you to have your business in order. There's installed apps here, which is a list of all the various applications that you yourself have installed. Make.com allows you to create your own apps, which is pretty interesting. Again, I'm basically never going to do a lot of these, so you're probably not going to use a lot of this either. But it does allow you to install stuff on the right hand side. So you really max out data security. Next up is variables. Not going to click this tab because Make.com has some execution variables, whatever. Um, you can read things like your execution logs and that sort of thing, but you can just click on there and see a list of variables like organization ID and something like, and then like a big. And then over here, scenario properties. I have never ever clicked this button. I'm learning about this with you guys, so no idea what the hell it looks like. So you're on some enterprise plan, and you can keep your long list of scenarios organized within your organization. It's one of the weakest part of Make.com, so it's very easy to get overwhelmed and disorganized flow. So I guess they're just trying to sell that as an upsell now. Uh, Same thing here with Team. You will notice that one of the downsides of Make.com is that a bunch of tabs and stuff like that be open and have the same info. As I mentioned, I love this platform, but it can be a little rough over the edges, and you'll see that we uh, repeat the same info over and over again. But there are different ways that you can error out in Make.com, and if you error out once, the scenario will give you a warning, and a warning is not the end of the world. It's not the end all be all. I actually get a few warnings every day. When you do about 50 different flows, the odds are eventually you're going to accumulate, some warnings. So I don't actually like getting these emails and notifications. I just turn them off. However, an error is different from a warning. Uh, uh, An error is when your actual scenario does not complete because of one of these issues that I mentioned earlier. And in that case, if one of my scenarios is making me money, not completing well, there's a problem, then I'll enable a notification, you know. But yeah, definitely something I want to know about. So I always leave it on, So if you're watching for the first time, I will always set these stuff off, on, and maybe you never use maybe make.com and maybe you want these warnings on. So feel free. There's another variables tab over here. Same thing I showed you earlier. And then there's scenarios, and this is where you're going to spend 90% of the time on this platform. There's all your inactive scenarios, all your concepts. You're probably never going to use concepts. Don't worry about this. This is what I mentioned earlier about disorganization. So you can see on the left hand side here, there's a bunch of these folders. I don't recommend setting up folders to organize your life, but you will inevitably get disorganized, and that's simply how Make.com works. So, I tried numbers, I tried a bunch of other things, and it's good to have things organized with the bird's eye view, but If you're constantly developing these things in Make.com, you will quickly understand just how quite a headache it gets to keep things organized. And I recommend just having some type of CRM folder, project management folder, something like that. It gets pretty deep. But I want to go through the actual scenario at the end. Um, but since this is gonna actually matters, so I'm gonna leave that to the end. I'm just gonna cover all this stuff in like a tenth of a time. Okay, next up are templates. If you are new to Make.com, you never used this before, but this is relatively simple feature in Make.com. It shows you a bunch of other systems that people, usually use. So yeah, just click every single one and see these concepts and see how they're made. It's pretty straightforward. Like look at this one, get Telegram messages from Google Sheets Row you know you just read through this. It's pretty self-explanatory, and it's nice to see what's possible in Make.com, like see what weather APIs, call rebel APIs, and tons of other stuff. So just give this a solid 5 minutes, and if you're new to this, just pause the video right now and just go to Make.com and look at the templates. um yeah, it's pretty neat. With that said, after you've read through it, you won't have to do it again. Connections. This is basically a giant list of authorized connections that you ever made with Make.com and any other platform. I've never used this, but unless I have like some kind of API error, then I'll jump on here and reauthorize. And then I won't. Other than that, I just won't worry about it. Webhooks. This is important right here. Make lets you set up recipient server addresses. Basically, you can use services to send a request, and these webhooks, all the time. In my company, we in this video course, I'm going to be showing you how to use these webhooks. As well as this tab, which right now isn't super relevant. It's just a list of webhooks, out. But you're always going to have some type of security verification process, and sometimes you have to use the URL, for your own record keeping, but not really. Next up are keys. You can set up API keys and Make. I never ever use this feature. I usually just hard code them directly in the scenario, so probably not going to use this either. Devices. Uh, Make.com has a mobile app that can be relevant. I set up low with this one time. I mean, like I've once out of 1,000 days, now I using the software. So basically, it was like a contractor or something like that needed to be able to click a button on their phone and use that to start a scenario. But realistically, you probably never use this feature, so I'm just gonna skip past it. Data storage is really interesting. This is a very controversial thing in the community. If you guys watched another video I did talk a lot about there's a lot of people out there that teach people about Make.com, but not really, for how to use it to make money. But yeah, Make.com lets you set up your own database, which is cool, but I really don't use it because usually like functionally handling or managing, something like Airtable or ClickUp or a project management platform like Go High Level or something like that. I don't really like to screw with my own database really because it's not super necessary. To me, it just adds an extra layer of complexity, and we're not software developers. And we don't need to like have different databases. So you'll need to do that. To do that, you can do it directly in those apps. Yeah, not going to touch on that. So my apps, similar to the App Store we saw before, you can make your own apps in Make.com. Um, and Resource Hub, which is basically like their built-in academy, where you can learn key concepts. And yeah, you're probably not going to need none of this, but it's nice to know that it's over here. Sometimes it can be informative, if and you don't understand some of the fundamental concepts like ops and logicals and how to filter and stuff like that. Feel free to check this out in your own time. And I'm just not going to get into it. Notifications. If scenarios are paused and they're warnings or errors, this is where you'll get them. I'll never click this button. I'll just use my own email. There's also a little help desk here, which you'll see is something like the resource source hub. Something like a little community, like academy contact support. Like I said, I've never used this. This is like where you can check out their affiliate program, and yeah, and set up your profile, first name, last name, time zone, email preferences, all this stuff. It's pretty fairly straightforward. I'm not gonna dial into that. So we're finally done with all the boring stuff that actually involve, making money. We can actually dive into how the scenarios work and how to build one for the first time, what an operation is, what an execution is, how the filters work, that sort of thing. And by the end of this next 15, 20 minutes, you should know everything you need to get yourself up and running. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now that we're back in the scenarios tab, uh, which is the tab that you're going to be spending most of your time on. If you click on the right hand corner of your screen, you'll be able to create a new scenario. And this is the builder here, and this is it. This is make.com basically. Really, there are a couple different buttons on the screen I want to go through. The first is the on the top left. This is how you name your scenario. This is the title of your scenario. So I always try to get that title done first, because I want to define what it is that I want the scenario to do, from an organizational perspective. So actually can create it. And in this case, it might be turn Google Sheets into a row into an email. And let's just pretend we're going to run from the bottom left corner. And the button you click is to run scenario once, and the manual execution. And you're going to use this all the time when you're testing a scenario. You're going to run it once. Underneath that, you're going to have a way to schedule your scenarios. This basically just turns it on and off. So now it's automated. You don't have to do it all the time. Here you have the ability to schedule at what intervals you want your scenario to run. So maybe you want yours to run at 15 minutes. Maybe you want it once at this date and time, or maybe you want to run it on the 3rd and the 15th of the month at a certain time. You have a lot of freedom, which is really cool, and the reasons why I like make.com. Yeah, it's just so many different functionalities. You next up you have a save button, which is how you save the scenario. Only losers ever click the button. If you're cool, you always use Control S, or I guess Command S if you're on Apple. Here are some scenario settings. People wax poetic about this stuff. The only function I will ever use in this scenario settings button is every time I create a new scenario, I will always go allow storing of incomplete executions, and I'll turn that to yes. The reason why is because it allows for you to use the error handlers, which I'll teach you about in another video. There's an area to do notes. I'll be honest, the note feature blows, and nobody cool uses it. So let's stay away from that. And there's also an auto align modules, and I'll pretend like I'm creating a scenario and we're using Google Sheets. And I'll explain what all these do in a moment. The cool part about make.com is that you can drag and drop stuff. You can move them around however you want. If you uh, if you click auto line button, all it'll do is just bring it back to like a set distance, make it look kind of pretty. Unfortunately, the auto line feature looks really ugly when you got a bunch of routers and stuff like that. So I don't really use this feature. I'll normally do it, auto line up myself. Then I'll build up my own, make.com art, but it's useful for some people. And the last button is the explain flow button, and this allows for you to see where the data is coming from. And basically I don't really use this feature that often, but in more complex flows where you have a bunch of routers and stuff, You may click this button every now and then. It's okay. Let's see what route goes first. And you also have these three little settings dots where you can do things with blueprints and version control. A blueprint is basically like a file that represents your whole make scenario. So I can export the blueprint and it'll be like a big old JSON file, and then I can import that again into another make.com account, and basically it's like a way to share, blueprints, between people, back and forth. It's still pretty cool, all things considered. So why don't we actually go ahead and make a brief scenario? Showing is better than telling. So first things first, you want to click this button, and then you'll be able to use one of the like all these software platforms. I always recommend, and I love doing this myself. Maybe once a month, I'll start at the top and just scroll down every single platform software that's on here. Odds are you'll see something that you didn't expect to be here, or you'll see a bunch of features that you can use later and give you some ideas. Later when you want to build out something better. So I always check these once a month, and I'll click through. Look, you got Android here. You can use this to automate various features on your Android phone. You know, so many features. I can scroll down this thing for hours. Clicking through every single API integration. It's amazing. So, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is use that Google Sheets example I was talking about earlier, because I want to explain the difference between a trigger and an action. So once you click on one of these apps, you'll see a big list of all the built-in Make.com endpoints. Essentially, it is what the engineers at Make.com and the engineers at the software platform thought that you're probably going to want to use the software for. There's are triggers and there are actions. And a trigger is named and is quite self-explanatory, but it's something that will make the workflow activate. And basically, you'll see here at the top, you watch. There's new rows is a trigger. What it means is every time a new row is added, Google Sheets, it'll make the workflow activate. And basically, there's Google Sheet changes, and this is where it watches for changes. So it's a little bit more granular. It says triggers when any cell is updated. So you'll see it sometimes. You'll require various add-on or extensions inside your Google Sheet in order to make this work perform a function. And there's another trigger here. It's like an endpoint called perform a function, uh, and that's when a data is passed to a make underscore function or an integromat function in a sheet. So you have a certain extension installed, then you can turn it on your flow, and vast majority of triggers and stuff like that you probably don't need to know really. I only use one, which is watch a new row or watch a new entry into the database CRM or project management tool. And just like that, you're ready to start the aspects of the process. So without further ado, I'm going to click watch new rows, and then what'll happen after you give that a click is little Google Sheets module, or it's going to pop up. And the very first thing you're going to need to do, if you don't already have one, is you're going to need to set up your connection. So go to your screen. It'll probably going to prompt you to click add. For purposes of this video, I'm just going to pretend like I'm setting up a connection for the first time. A connection is just ways. I'm sorry. A connection just makes a way of getting into your systems, for logging into the account. Basically, if we want to automate things on your behalf, we'll need to, log in on your behalf, and that's what Make.com is doing right here. So some best practices for connection names. But I like to write whatever company I'm working for right here in the property name. So in my case, be right here. And then also put a date, which is something I've recently started doing. This is significant. Excuse me. This is significantly better from an organization perspective. Now, since we're using Google Sheets, It's going to ask us to sign in with Google. It's pretty straightforward. And I have a bunch of accounts here. I'm just going to sign into one, copy that, and stuff here. And that way you can see and edit whatever my Google Drive files are. Okay, great. And after that checks out, a bunch of, I guess, options here. And open in order for you to, okay. Yeah, in order for you to know this, what the specific Google sheet that you want, you got to select it right here. Um, it's quite simple. Hopefully you don't trip up. Like if you're using Make.com for the first time, you probably don't know the difference between searching by path, selecting from, all entering manually, that sort of thing. But you learn pretty quickly. If you just click search by path and then you're trying to select Google Drive, it's the drive that you're trying to select. For me, it's right here. So just click this button and you see a list of various spreadsheets and Google Sheets, basically, in the account. So just simply select one and then connect. So to this, in my case, it's Phantom Buster, Scrape, List, random inbound Google, and I set that up. And you can select the specific sheet, and then just watch for new rows and being added to that. And Make.com is simple enough that it'll just walk you through generally what you need to do in the trigger, and just like carry every second. Sorry about my phone. Okay, so basically make sure every field fill out every field, because it's usually how to target the data. You have a bunch of options, and I'm not going to go through every one specific feature because it's not really necessary to get a platform running. So I think we're just going to go through sort of a in general how to build things out with Make.com. So yeah, you're always going to want to trigger you know some kind of external database or anything like that. I'm almost always just use the platform my clients are using. For me, building on. And so Google Sheets is like the simplest example, so that's why I'm just using Google Sheets. But most likely I use like Airtable or something like that, because it has similar triggers, where you can watch a new row is added and you can do things. So I'll make an Airtable video later, or you'll see an example if I'm using Airtable later. But I'm just using Google Sheets because it's kind of a simple way to follow, right? And yeah, because Google Sheets is sort of just like a way for you to get your mental model, on, and basically how all this stuff works correctly. In most models that pop up, there'll be advanced settings button, which you can click and scroll down. And I basically never use the advanced setting. In some cases, I will, but for you, you probably don't really need to do that. And for the purpose of what we're doing, which is just to show you, building these up, these simple flows that makes, my clients, large amounts of money. Usually, defaults are more than sufficient. You don't have to go into advanced settings. Let's click OK. It'll ask you when you want to start, so we'll do all. And if you're paying close attention, you'll notice there's another circle connected to our module. This is the scheduling circle that I showed you guys earlier. So if I click on this, the same schedule is going to pop up where you can define how often you want to run this flow. So let's say if I want to run this on demand, it'll switch to a little cute arrow. And now this scenario is only going to run when I click run once. So you have a lot of options on how you want to set these things up, regular intervals, So let's say it's every 15 minutes. What's actually happening under the scene is that every 15 minutes, Make.com will send a request to your Google Sheet, and it'll compare the last time Google, uh, like the instance Google Sheet was current, and it'll ask all the appropriate questions and see if it's the right Google Sheet. So it's pretty self-explanatory, right? So we're just going to go to another module, and you can select like the software platform you want to add, and you can add the appropriate platform and that all type of thing. So hypothetically, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to go to email, and you'll see now that there's no triggers remaining. It's only actions, and that's because we've already defined the trigger before. And the only thing we can do here is like do something like create an action or something as the result of that trigger. So you can see the basic email module. There's a ton of different features. You can create a draft. So we're just gonna run this to see, how the email module works. And just like same thing before, you can add a bunch of connections because this is an email module and not a specific Gmail module. For instance, it doesn't assume that you're using the Google stack, and then you can select a type of connection, whether it's Google restricted or whether you're doing it through IMAP, whatever you want. Microsoft Outlook, whatever. Um, you know, Basically, you can hypothetically select what you want. So we're gonna authorize another connection. See what happens here. All right, you can read this. Yeah, make sure that's what you want to do. Just make sure you read that. And obviously, it's gonna push for as many permissions as possible. So don't worry about too much of that. All right, yeah. Now we can actually do something with this email. Even though the module is a little bit quirky, specifically because it asks you to choose a folder, I always just choose inbox for whatever, and I just do what I need to because basically it's however I want to. So, so maybe I want to make it say add a new row or something like that, or maybe I want to use my sheet ID. You can use HTML plain text. Maybe I want to write a bunch of regular HTML. You know, so yeah, so it's a link here to this Google Sheet, uh, something like that, which would render as an actual link in the person's account, or in the email. You got a lot of options. You can structure it how you want. Basically, what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So however, I mentioned, Make will usually tell you, if you need to do something, if you haven't done it already. I mean, I just try to remove this, and it automatically, says I can't remove the recipient. So unless you already have the recipient right now, so you're just gonna have to add a new one. That is more or less how the scenario builder works. There are a bunch of other features we can start getting into if you want to build more complex flows. Like right now, we're at the point where we could just build one giant linear flow from end to end, but I'm not going to get into too much of that right now. So as you see this little gear here between modules, this is called a filter. If you click here, you can create a filter where let's say I want to, let's say maybe row equals hello. And what you can do is set a condition, and this will allow you to select various variables from previous modules. So there's a row number, accessible spreadsheet ID. I have a couple of columns in my specific, spreadsheet. One is called, geography, and it has to equal Canada. And this will filter out anything where the geography tab in my Google Sheet is not equal or is equal. I'm sorry. It'll continue the progression of the row or anything that's equal. And you can add multiple conditions if you want. You can add or conditions. You have a lot of freedoms on how you want to set up these filters. When a filter is set up, a little wrench icon will change into this filter icon. So it's important to be able to keep that in mind. Make has a little bug right now where the filter name doesn't pop up unless you drag and drop the module. So if you drag and drop, you'll see that text and that you wrote actually pops up, and so it's very interpretable. And basically it becomes very maintainable and very easy to use. And I actually want to touch on that feature while we're on the topic. The reasons why I like Make.com and why I think it's so awesome is, how interpretable it is. Um, let's say, hold on, let's say I want to have an automation. I'm give it to my clients, and for my own automation agency, if I wrote a big 200 line block of code and just hand it over to my client on a silver platter, my client would be like, "Yeah, this looks nice," but they can't really do anything with it. You know, there's no real way for them to know, and a lot of times they don't appreciate it as much. So if I made a make.com flow and there's a module that says Google Sheets, literally, and it has a filter that says Geography Canada. It has all this. You can read it. It's not super techy, and you can get a lot of easy. It's a lot easier to allow for you to see your successes and take credit for complex business architecture decisions. And make.com makes it very easy. And another really cool part about is it's a lot more maintainable. I mean, by this it's even if I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, then let's say maybe like my automations, I send it to one of my guys and I send a scenario. Odds are they can click through the scenario and see where the data is being pulled from, uh, at least in a natural language, and that way they can make decisions like you know they wonder how to pull multiple entries instead of just one. That's a possibility, and we can communicate in a lot more business savvy way, which is obviously a big advantage if you want to grow a company that makes large amounts of money, and that's what they need. Okay, great. There are a couple of other features that we need to touch on that I mentioned. In a place, you can select variables from previous modules. That's obviously very important. You'll see since Google Sheets is the only one. So you see, if I click on this icon right here, you'll see some general functions. There are brackets you can use in Make.com. There are functions like get, if empty, omit. The only ones I probably use is if empty. I do use get. I do use switch. I don't think I ever use and omit or pick in my whole life because the functionality is taken care of by other functions like keywords like true or false. Um, let's see. You can say like if I don't know geography, and then we have to select the equal sign, and then we say Canada, and then maybe output true, and then output false, hypothetically. These functions are necessary for building out more complex flows that are more logically involved flows, but I'll be honest, a lot of times you're barely going to use these functions. All you're going to be doing in high ROI systems is, connecting data source A to field B, or another maybe you'll schedule something that checks every 15 minutes to see if you got an email that matches these filters, and then you'll forward to you'll forward an onboarding email, to someone else. It's very simple, and if you ever think you're ever going to use it, Make.com does have some pretty good documentation where you can just mouse over and then see what kind of document they have, for the purpose or use case behind the function. Okay, next up are the math functions. Now, there's some variables here you can automatically insert, like there's a variable for pi. This is going to render anything that's 3.14, do all the math stuff. There is a random function, so you can use this, and this is something that I will use, something to just automatically create a random number between 0 and 1, and that's very useful for if you want to, you know, generate a random number. you can do that here. And there's some functions here that I'll use from time to time. I'll use average sometimes, I'll use sum, and then down here there's some operators like multiplication, division, plus, minus, less than, all that good stuff. Next, we have text and binary functions. There are some variables here that some people use from time to time that some people create automatically, like a unique ID, which is sometimes useful if you want to add like entries into a database or whatever. I don't really use it. I create my own unique ID when I want one. There's a bunch of text functions that are useful, like the length of a string. You can place this in a lot of filters, and you can just check and see if the length is something that's greater than zero. Basically, if it's greater than zero, odds are the field exists. Lower. You can use lowercase. This stuff is sometimes useful when you want to creating WordPress posts automatically. The URL, the time, the URL post. Um, like hello, how are you doing? And like using uppercase URLs or whatever you want, and I'll pass through all my URLs through the lower function, for instance, and then around that I would wrap it around a replace function, and that way the replace function works. It's maybe if you have your URL, you can search for a new line, and then empty space. Every time you see a space, just replace it with nothing, or maybe replace it with a dash or something like that. You know, it's just nice to have that flexibility and freedom. So length lower, capitalized, start, um, ASCII. I'm not going to go into all this, but uh, suffice to say, most of the stuff is important, and you'll see some. But yeah, next is date and time function. This is super useful. Probably one of my number one used tabs in the creator screen. Basically, the way make.com functions work, date functions work, you can look at the date right now. It says Saturday, and all this. And that is text string, which represents a date. It isn't actually a date. Make.com has its own date and time format. You'll just have to give it a date, and then it'll turn that date into anything that you want, like a text string or something. You can turn it into a format where maybe it looks like this, and or something um like so make.com's date string. I don't remember exactly how they were written, but something like 106303 or UTC or something like that. It's gonna be something like this. That's total BS. Oh, there's no vertical pipes there. But it should look something like this. It's gonna be like a long string of numbers that make.com knows is a date format. And then you can just turn whatever that is into anything else. So if I were to type now, that now will be equivalent to that. And then make.com will have a bunch of functions that allow you to easily parse the date or format the date, however you want. So okay, so here's the format right here. 20, 1612, 28, T, and then that's the time zone, and so I can say the format date, and I can do it like this, and I can format this date, and I can format it so it says like day slash month slash year. What would happen here is it would take that current date time, and it would expand it to a long number thing, that we said earlier, or maybe it'll be like 2024 D2, D02, or D7, something like that. So it will format it into something that's more legible. So okay, say something like 17 slash month slash 02 slash year, which is something it's very awesome, and it's something that I use often. So sometimes I check to see if the dates are before or after some dates that I can catch within my CRM. and it's so when to send out the email or don't send out the email. So that sort of deal. And there's a bunch of other functions down here that allow you to do so, which I'll cover when I actually build the flows out. Lastly, there are array functions, and I've left this to the end because arrays are something that a lot of people have trouble with Make.com. I don't really use arrays at all. uh, I know that any Make.com developers, going to look at me and be like, you shouldn't do that, but really don't need to use arrays. If you're catching yourself using arrays, it's probably because you're trying to optimize your operations, which I'll touch on in a sec, but it's unnecessary because you have to use the arrays a lot of the flows that I build out. I could build it out with a super long array, or I could save time myself with a bunch of ops or something like that. But then I'll never, but I never do. I'll just build simply as possible, from start to finish, and that's the principle that I think is more important to touch on, which is simplicity. Like if you're really designing, make.com flows, to make money and make it manageable and maintainable, you want it to be as simple as possible, and nobody's going to run down your whole flow with a million routes. We're here to develop flows that make money, and a lot of times they're really simple to make, and they're not really complex ones. So these are still useful. Don't get me wrong. I just haven't used them in so long. I mean, the array part is one of the reasons why most people have trouble getting through Make.com. So basically, a simple one. So I'm gonna try and backload as much as possible. I'm gonna have to deal with this way too much. So uh, then we're gonna have some custom valuables here which aren't relevant, and I basically rarely use them, so I'm just gonna skip over that. Awesome. Now, I'm not gonna go ahead and choose a folder. I'm actually just going to go and delete all of these that are relevant. Suffice to say that this is a good introductory section. I just wanted to go over some things, a couple more buttons. There's a flow control and how to repeat, how to integrate, aggregate, how to route different decisions, that sort of thing. There's a built-in trigger, built-in actions. Some people use a lot of their make scenarios. We're going to get into all that stuff when we're actually building practical flows for you live, and we're not going to worry about any of that stuff right now. Thank you very much for watching. You've gotten this point in the video, which is technically the end. I'm going to go through a second video where we're realistically, using these scenarios. I don't really think this one counts. I mean, I'm just going over the general interface of Make.com, of all things you need to understand. 10% of the steps and buttons and so forth don't actually matter and understand. Basically, 90% are the ones that you just don't really need to be concerned about. So basically, just learn that 10% of the what really makes the money that you can apply to your business today. You know. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, it sounds like something you'll enjoy. Keep watching. I'm gonna release some other videos showing how to use Make.com to automate, your business, and basically leave some comments below if there's any systems that you're interested in making. I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube, but basically, I'm always here. You can always call me 404 905 1741, and you have a good one. Thanks.